2nd, 2023 at 4:30 PM, and I'm calling the Park and Recreation Committee to order. We do have a quorum present. Number 2 on the agenda is public comment or suggestions. Unless Eric Lindman has any comment or suggestions, we can move on to number 3. Number 3, I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the September 11th meeting. Do I have a motion? Motion from Watson, second by Killian. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passed. Agenda 4 is discussion and possible action reviewing the 2024 Parks, Recreation, and Forestry City Budget Allocation. And boy, I'll turn that one over to Jamie.
Thank you. So we have put in our budgets for the city. We have not heard anything back yet from city finance, so I'm not really sure where the city budget is, or if I'm going to have to make some adjustments to the budget we submitted. So we'll see where that goes. But what we have submitted, because we already had to submit the county one, the county is on a really long budget development this year based on what the county board members want to have input on and stuff like that. So we're doing a big overview with our park commission and ERC tomorrow, which has the county budget. So the city budget is part of my county budget just because it's basically expenses out and revenue in based on the charges back and forth. But on the city particular budget, what we have turned in is an increase of 5.5% over last year. And that's where we'll get feedback from the city's finance committee or the city's finance director about if we need to look at some of this. Biggest increases is, our personnel costs, when you see the sheet that I'll show you in a little bit, it looks like they went up 5%, but our full-time wages were, the direction of the county was to increase 3% because we had a large wage adjustment overall countywide. I wouldn't say every individual had a large, it depended where you were in the scale, but we had that that last year when we had our class comp study done. So right now they're looking at just a cost of living increase of 3% for full-time. Just so you know too, that's not necessarily every employee gets 3%. It's a certain percentage plus it's a pay for performance, so it's also based on everybody's annual review and where they fall. So we're not sure exactly how that's going to be broken out this year compared to other years. But other years, let's say everybody got a minimum of a 2% and then we had 1% of our budget to use as some adjustments to people based on their performance. It's a very cumbersome process, but it's what we have done in the past. So that's what's built in there. We do have some, with Workday, it's been able to be clearer on cost allocations, like for our part-time staff, so that's where some of the increases are. I'll get to a couple of the other increases because of Workday here in a second, but even though it's taken a lot of time to put in our budget and to get a grasp on where we were, where we're going, we do think it will be much cleaner and much easier from years on out, going out. And having the fact that we did the city's budget in TM1 last year, which is the budget software, it helped us with Workday this year, where there's other county departments that have never worked in that kind of a system and are completely lost. Like, it's been really difficult. So we're hoping that we get a better idea of where our budget's going. That $18,000 that's in there is a collective increase for all the utilities based on what we were given from the different companies, basically what we're at with our current costs. So that was probably our largest increase. And then looking at a increase for gasoline, we have an increase in refuge collection. Now we're going to be looking at that contract also and figuring out where we can be more efficient with refuse collection. Like, for instance, the dumpsters at Schofield Park. We have 2 of them there. We did remove one now after baseball season because we've had such a dumping problem at that park. And so we're working with the company to see if we start doing more seasonal canisters or more seasonal dumpsters, could that reduce that amount a little bit? So we hope to make some efficiencies there. The other thing, and this is a placeholder right now, is we put in both our city and our county budget some tuition and registration fees for CDL training. There are new standards for CDL training. Right now we have 6 employees. that need a CDL based on our requirements for employment. We are also looking at that to see if there's any positions within our department where a CDL would not be required. But it's much more cumbersome, longer process. I think we're talking with many different entities in our highway department and such to figure out how we can do this more efficiently and more cost effectively. So hopefully that cost will be able to come down and we may be able to have some training locally. But that is a placeholder in there. And then we had some insurance increases. The other biggest increase was because of the implementation of Workday. We were able to better track our costs for delivery. So that 22,000 increase in there is in 3 different areas, and it's in the services that the county provides to do city park services. So the, because we hire all the employees through the county, so there's employee recruitment and retention and onboarding in there. There's a amount that is the Workday portion of the bill pay. So the way that our budgets work is most of the bills that we have on the city side, we process at the county, and then they just go into that monthly billing that we bill back to the city for reimbursement. Everything but capital improvement projects. Capital improvement projects are not, the bills go directly to the city for the city to pay. So that's not part of this. And this is something that will be a work in progress as well. Originally, when we put in Workday, we were under the impression that because the city and the county were both going to Workday, that we could pay bills directly out of the city account, which would take some of this dollars away. Once it was implemented, we realized that we cannot do that interdepartmentally, but it doesn't mean that they're not still looking at it for a possibility in the future. It's just as of today, the city is separate from the county, and it can't be, like, you can do some transfers between the two based on similar how we did it before with a journal entry or stuff like that, but our department does not have access to the city finances to pay bills directly out of our city budget. So it's going to remain the way that it's always been for now. But hopefully, because of the integration, we can make that more efficiently too. It's just this first year, it is still pretty separate. Revenue, we did increase also by 6%, and this is based on past revenue numbers, increased fees, and increased demand for services. So we've just realized that there are some areas based on our services, like swimming lessons, for instance, we've got waiting lists the last couple of years. So if we can increase the numbers of offerings that we have, we can increase that revenue. The other big things I wanted to cover with our budget, and this is still going through, we did give this to Mary Ann last week because it's brand new on the county side, is the county is looking, so the county has ARPA dollars to spend just like the city did. And they're trying to figure out how to best use all of their different funds. One thing that has been a conversation for a number of years, probably since I started 5.5 years ago, is our rolling stock budget. So every year, certain departments get rolling stock dollars to replace our equipment. Per the agreement that the city and the county had from 1974, the city agreed to pay 50% of all of the Parks Department equipment that's used solely for the Parks Department. So basically our rolling stock budget, instead of doing each individual machine and then charging it that way, we were given many, many years ago just a lump sum budget. Our highway department's given a lump sum budget, same as sheriffs. I think the city has the same thing. And then our rolling stock was split 50-50. So the same amount was always budgeted on both city and county side. So that 173,460, you would have seen every year you've been on council within that budget, because that hasn't changed in 10 plus years. So that's where the county's looking at, knowing that we're falling further and further behind of replacing our rolling stock because the cost of machines has significantly increased. And then on the years where we need, a high dollar machine like a High Ranger that does all of our aerial lift work for urban forestry, or a dump truck, that takes up a very big chunk of our budget. So the county is looking, the HR Finance Committee last week made a motion to increase our rolling stock dollars by 20%. So what that means is 36,000 on the county side, and then it would match on the city side. So That is still to be approved through the county budget. It would also have to be approved through the city budget, so if the city decides not to match the county, it just makes more work for our department to try to figure out how we allocate correctly then of those dollars for those machines. But that is something that may be discussed as the budgets get approved and kind of go through. Still, that doesn't, raising it essentially 70,000 a year helps us a little bit, but it doesn't help us a lot that's like the cost of a pickup truck plus a trailer. I don't know. It's not very much. So that's kind of where the city budget is, where we are so far. And like I said, I haven't gotten any feedback yet, but here's how it breaks down between personnel services, contracted services. This is something I put in the Parks Committee's packet each year. You can see how we get to that 5.5% increase. As you go through the budget for the council, if we're told to look at cutting things, we'll go back to the drawing board. That's how it usually happens. We're supposed to have a meeting with our finance director usually before this meeting, before it comes to you, so that I can get that direction. We have not had that yet, so this is what has been submitted so far. Could still change based on further direction. One thing I have heard is our county's insurance for employees only went up 5.5% or 6.5%. I have to go back and check, but I think it is significantly lower than what I've heard the city's insurance has gone up. So maybe when it comes to the county, the city budget for the Parks Department, because we're county employees, maybe that will look much better. I don't know.
Any questions or comments for Jamie? All right, we'll move on. We're going to go to number 5 on the agenda, educational items, and believe it or not, Jamie is going to be very talkative today, and I'm turning that all over to her to summarize.
And pardon me, Madam Chair, I wasn't sure if this was part of the last item or the next item. I think it may have been the last item. The amounts associated with the different park improvements, like the trail system in 3M Park, it mentioned a grant for that. And will that be discussed as part of the updates or part of the last item, or?
You're right, part of the last, it should have been reviewed with the budget part. So,
Oh,
yeah.
no problem. I was just wondering, could you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Sure, yes. So every year within our budget, we get a small project amount budget too, and it was $110,000 that goes into our budget. This is to help basically with deferred maintenance, so that not everything has to go through the CIP process. And as I mentioned in previous meetings, we didn't get anything for CIP this year or last year for parks, so to try to keep up at least with some deferred maintenance, this is what this budget is for. So we usually put a list together. This list is subject to change based on, something that arises, or, like when we discussed the wall at Stewart Park, if we have money left over, it comes out of here. So it's a small project budget. So this is what projects we know we've had either on our list or that are in need of attention. So we have, as we talked about with Stewart Park, we have a lot of the rock wall type step around the whole city that we constantly need to try to keep up on. So that's Riverside Park. The lighting on the bridge from Oak Island to Fern Island, it's there. We were going to upgrade it based on just the usage of that, but that's probably a very low hanging fruit compared to the entire list. We do need to do some trail updates to Fern Island. As starting in we're going to keep it in here for now, but the city playground engineer wood fiber, this starting in 2025 will go into the general operating budget because it's just a maintenance. This $5,000 is just enough to buy just to top off playgrounds. We had this in our small project budget in years prior because we were switching over from sand, which is no longer acceptable in playgrounds, to engineered wood fiber, so this number was a lot higher. Now it's just a general maintenance thing. The asphalt path and trail connections, so this is as you can see, a whole bunch of them that were identified in our ADA audit that we need to get some ADA trail connections either from a parking lot to a playground, from a street to a playground, from the boat launch to a car, those type of things.
Ms. Polly, so when you use the term trail in that context, are you referring to what essentially sounds more like a sidewalk, or are these part of an actual trail system?
No, they serve more as a connection, like a sidewalk, but they're gonna be built to the width of a trail. So that 8 to 10 foot width, probably asphalt instead of concrete like a sidewalk would be. But they're more of just that connection. The 3M trail reconstruction, this is, we've had this on the list for a while. We need to rebuild the entire trail that goes through 3M Park. It's got a lot of issues with tree roots and just, it's deteriorating. But we know that it also has along it, like a educational trail that we had a local organization help put in. I think it was United Way. I have to back it. We are gonna go back to them because we have had some conversations with the group. They're interested in helping do some funding to upgrade it, but then with that, because it's more of a community-based thing rather than just the trail, it's got the educational and I think a music component to it, we will apply for a grant for this. So right now it's a placeholder in a small project, knowing that we need to do it, but we hope that this $28,000 would be funded either through partnership with that organization to update it, or a portion of that plus a community enhancement grant. So that's where that one is. We have some updates to the doors at Sylvan Hill, just to make them commercial grade. The doors that are there are original doors that are having some issues. And then each year we do some press box replacements, some dugout replacements. This is kind of as we get to, this has been on our list for a while. That's why we have approximate to these next two at Brockmeyer, because we also want to work with the groups. Brockmeyer's baseball field is used mainly by Newman. So we want to work with the school district to see what they need to, and not really replace anything that doesn't have any value, only if they actually use it. So we'll be working with them. The River Life concession fencing. So we've had significant issues with the air conditioning unit since it was put in at River Life, and have been working with the contractor to get a lot of things figured out. So where we're at right now is basically we found out that the unit that was put in is too big for the space. It didn't have enough airflow. So the first thing we did was if you've been down at River Life, you'll see that part of that wall that was around it's more to the north of the building, was around the mechanical area, has been taken down and chain link fences put up at the moment. That was the first attempt to get it more more airflow to go in. The next attempt is that the ductwork in the building is too low, so it's not allowing enough airflow in the building. So that actually is being raised and changed as we speak. And we had two different companies look at that and give us their opinion on whether or not they felt that was the fix. And they both do, so we're moving ahead with that. But this fencing is, because the chain link fencing, although it allows air in, it's not the look that I was under the impression when I was part of that construction process of that concession stand that we really wanted that to look like. But that wall and that fence needs to have airflow through it for this air conditioning unit to work. So we are going to be proposing, Andy's doing some research on fencing right now, getting some quotes. It's going to be a significant price, but I'm going to talk with Marianne about what funding options we might have for a fence. Basically what we're looking at is a metal, like a stainless steel fence with slats in it that's basically open, but it's still privacy, but it would allow the air to go through. But it could be the color and the look of the concession building so that it fits in with what that wall had looked like. So that's why there's no dollar amount to it. We just know that that's a fix. Once we know that the air conditioning unit is fixed, we need to get the fencing. Well, it's not the air conditioning unit. Once we know that the airflow within the building allows the air conditioning unit to work properly, then we'll have to fix the fencing. We're not going to do that until we know that that unit is going to work. So it's kind of a work in progress, because we're going to run the air conditioning as soon as this ductwork is done. We're going to keep running the air conditioning to make sure that it is working properly this year before we change it over to the winterization, and then this will most likely be a spring type type of a project for fencing. Our poolside maintenance is, we have three pools with, each pool has 2 slides. This is an every 5-year thing, but we're gonna do, this will be enough for 1 slide to do, and then we'll do 2 slides, 1 pool to do each year, and we'll rotate them. So for 3 years, we'll have this project within our small projects, and then we'll have 2 years off, and we'll start them again as we keep these slides resurfaced. We have in our small projects the goats. We had put them as a supplemental last year, and the direction was to keep them in small projects, so they remain in here. We do have to do slide inspections too every 5 years, I believe that is also. We have a sign to install at River Life, which we've had for a long time. It's just a low priority because it's just a decorative slide at the southern, decorative sign at the southern entrance by Wow. That's the same as by the north entrance and the one that's down kind of by the eye clinic, just another directional sign. And then this athletic park columns, we're actually thinking of doing this year. We do have some money left over in our small project fund. This was brought forward as a CIP project. It was not funded, but the Kowalski Construction, who you've heard from regarding Stewart Park, may have some time this fall to do those 5 caps that need to be replaced. And he has 4 of them in his yard, so he just has to make 1. But there's more work to it than just taking them off and putting them on. But he thinks he can do that along with Stewart Park this fall. So that's a little over the 110,000 that we get. And like I said, this is a work in progress, so we prioritize as things come through. But that's our small project, and that amount is within our general operating budget. So that was submitted.
Any questions for Jamie? Comments? All right, we'll let you continue. We're going to touch on the Great Pinery Heritage Waterway overview.
Yep, first I'll do the park updates.
Okay.
Just a little bit about the park updates. You can read most of them, but we're doing, now we're starting the end of season, getting ready for winter. We are replacing the safety netting at Athletic Park. We've had a lot of balls go through it. We keep sewing it up, so we're replacing that finally. We are doing some plumbing work in front of the concession area, and you'll see a lot of these. We've had great assistance from DPW on paving, so thank you, Eric, to you and your crew for helping us out there. They do a great job with that. So, and we try to do things based on what their availability is. So the athletic park thing is happening now. We replaced the roof and chimney at Pleasant View. Some more pavement. I've already talked about River Life concession stand, the ADA path. Schofield Park, it mentioned that we've had a lot of illegal dumping there. We did put up a camera there by the dumpster by the boat launch. And out of 40,000 pictures, we were able to catch 4 people illegally dumping. 2 were
Good.
very clear on looking and finding their license plate. The other 2, our rec deputies had to do a little bit of research, and there's a great system that Wausau PD and the Sheriff's Department have where you can type in a car, make and model, or roughly make and model, and then some distinctive features like Batman sticker or anything like that, and it'll pull up all of those cars that match that description. And so our rec deputy was able to find the other 2 people and issued all 4 of them citations. So
Good
that
job.
was successful. Hopefully one of them was the guy who remodeled this whole bathroom and put everything in the dumpsters. I don't know. We did some work at Sylvan Hill, some more path work. Big project that you'll see happen here at the end of October is the bathrooms at Oak Island will come down. And that was part of a CIP project, that did get approved last year, was to replace those bathrooms at Oak Island. So we will be putting the slab in and getting it ready this fall. And then our crews will be building it this winter. It'll have a completely different look than the block bathroom that's down there, but it will hopefully look more in line with the park shelter and the way the park is. So, skate park, we're reviewing the 90% documents. We will, because of the timing, end up bidding this over the winter for spring construction. And then, as you'll see, a lot of our fountains and our bathrooms will start to close mid-October because of winterization and to make sure pipes don't freeze and all that kind of stuff. So, the other thing I just wanted to touch on is our park cleanup and vandalism. We continue to have encampments throughout the park, so we're continuing to work with the PD on those, through those processes that were put in place. But we have had significant increases in vandalism and garbage at Hammond Park and Kickbush Plaza. I don't know if you've gotten calls. I know that the PD are constantly getting calls, especially from people living in those apartment buildings at Hammond Park, but it's becoming very, very bad. I don't know how else to put it. So I am meeting with the mayor and the police chief on Friday to talk about if there's anything more we can do. I don't really know, but we are spending a significant amount of time at these parks, specifically those two, cleaning up and taking care of graffiti and garbage and trying to clean as best we can. But it's been very increased. It's been very, not using my words right, but there's been a much larger amount of people there more regularly that are leaving a lot of garbage and not taking care of the facilities. So that is the park updates.
Now I'm going to let you go on to the Great Pinery Heritage Waterway overview.
Yeah, so this is something that I mentioned in my park updates at the last month meeting. So the park committee asked if I could just give an overview of what this is. I put in your packet a little blurb here, but also the press release that came out. Basically, the Parks and Recreation and Parks and Recreation Foundation that we have here in the county that basically helps raise money to enhance the park system of both Wausau and Marathon County. They do other things too with, to enhance parks within the county, but mainly the parks within the city of Wausau and the county parks. But they worked together along with a lot of other foundations, the Historical Society and the Historical Society to put together this waterway called the Great Pinery Heritage Waterway that's 108 miles. It starts up at Hat Rapids in Oneida County and it finishes by Lake Dubay. A large portion of it in Marathon County is either a city or a county boat launch and within there. Basically what it did was it took a trail that was already intact by the Wisconsin Valley Improvement Company that they had on their website, and it improved it. It took that template, it looked at all of the mileage markers and updated those so they were more accurate. It looked at the river conditions within different sections of the river. So at each boat landing there will now be a sign, and we'll show you a picture of that in a little bit, or I can go down to that now. There'll be a sign that on that sign will have, I'm going to go to the sign. So on one side it will have kind of that segment of, oh, this is not a touch screen, of where you are at. With the map, it'll have a map. This is kind of small on here, but it will have a map of the river, and it will say, you are here, and it will have a chart at the bottom. I know you can't really see this on the TV too much, but it will have a chart at the bottom that will show the distances from this point to the next point, from the next point to the next point. So you can see the segments of the river that you're going to be canoeing or kayaking. It will show some difficulty. It will show if there's rapids. It will show if there's a portage where you have to get out of your canoe or kayak and walk around. A land structure, the biggest portage that we have in our area is the one along the dam here in Wausau, where you have to get out and walk all the way around it to get below the dam. So that will be on one side of the sign. The other side of the sign will actually have this historical piece. So that's where they worked with the Historical Society both in Marathon County and in Lincoln County to put together some historical facts of the river, of the area, of why logging used the river at such a big part, different heritage that came and settled in this area. So there is a sign. We're putting them in as we get time, but one sign is already installed, is the one down here at River Life. So you can see what they look like. And basically it's a water trail that has been designated as a state water trail. And I'm going to zoom out here so you can see in the press release It's Wisconsin's 21st water trail, so it was designated there, and it's going through the process later this year to become a national water trail. So we've had different meetings with the National Forest Service on the trail and what it means, and that just helps get it more recognized. There's possibly some funding available for upkeep and stuff through there. So our department is in charge of maintaining the boat launches that we've always been, the city boat launches and the county boat launches. So the only thing that this adds to our work is the sign. And there is funding available with the foundation to replace signage if needed, if it gets vandalized, if it gets hurt in any way. But really they wanted to see, this was an idea that came, we have all these boat launches, we've been putting in these kayak launches in different locations, so why not promote it for our citizens to be able to have destination and know where they're going and know what the distances and the difficulty is of each section and how, you know, they might navigate that, or if you want to put in at one area and go down and take out at another, you know, where you need to park your car and stuff like that. So they saw this as an opportunity to get people to the community for tourism as well. You know,
Yep.
we have a lot of biking trails, and sometimes people come for biking. They may bike for 2 or 3 days, maybe they want to do something else, so then they give an idea for kayaking. So that's what this water trail is. I put in the PowerPoint that the foundation had put together, a lot of information in there as to kind of the background of kayaking, the uptick in participation of it, how many paddlers participate, you know, in different areas, what the age demographic is, why our area with the confluence of the different rivers is so conducive to this and a, you know, very positive part for this. We've got the Eau Claire River, the Wisconsin River, and the Rib River that all come together, and if we can work, you know, our way from the Lake Wausau kind of out to get all those other rivers to have different connections too, then people can kind of go from all over and have different day trips, afternoon, whatever. So we have there's 25 landings total of the entire trail. I think 10 of them, 10 or 11, are managed by our department. They're either in the city of Wausau or the county. So that's the signs we're putting in, and it's got the mileage marker and where those are. This will also be a plan as we move forward, as we replace some launches to put in maybe a few more ADA launches. We don't need ADA launch at every single kayak launch that we have, but if we spread them out sporadically and strategically, then, you know, that makes it even more attractive for members of the community to be able to use the water trail. Right now we have an ADA launch at River Life, and then we have one at DC Everest Park, along with the kayak rental station at DC Everest Park. The city of Schofield just put one in over by the dam, kind of by Grand Avenue. Over there is a ADA kayak launch, and then the village of Rib Mountain put one in over by Gulliver's Landing. So there's 3 right on Lake Wausau, and then 1 north of the dam that we have. So that's kind of an overview of the trail. I'm not going to go through this whole PowerPoint, but if you have any questions or comments on it.
I think the Park and Rec Committee should take a tour. Should get some of our kayaks and check it out.
You can go on a kayak tour. That would be fun.
Any questions or comments for Jamie? All right, folks, we're getting to the end. First of all, any future agenda items for next month's
Oh, wait,
meeting?
we have the Riverside.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah.
Riverside remediation, I apologize.
So this was sent out, and I think this is why Mr. Lindman might be here if we have any questions, but before their last meeting, these documents were requested by Mr. Killian and then
Yeah.
sent out, but we didn't have them on the agenda, so they were requested to be on the agenda just for a final review of the work that had been done at Riverside Park, and so they were included as an update for you in your packet.
Yeah, I'll briefly go through, and then if you have questions specific. So all the remediation that we thought needed to be done was done. There's one site, S33, which is at the base of the hill, kind of towards the east side on the map, that we're going to have to go back in and take out a couple, I don't know, not a lot, about a cubic yard of soil or so. Just, there was a exceedance there. It was about 6 parts per trillion over the limit. The lab flagged the sample as having interference with other constituents in the sample or, within the soil. So they didn't get a clear reading, so they couldn't verify it. But I think for us, rather than resampling and with those costs, it would be better if we just went in, removed a little bit of soil, and then take a sample just to make sure everything is clean there.
You said 33?
Yeah, I believe that's right. Did I say that right?
So, let me see.
Yeah, S33.
Okay,
Yep.
so right at, if you can see on the TV, my little cursor, it's right over here.
Yeah. And then there are 3 samples up along the property boundaries where there's some exceedances too, but we've cleaned everything up to the city property, up to that boundary line. So when we finish up with S33, we'll complete the report and submit it to the DNR, and then wait on their decision on anything that might have come from off-site, and what their determination is on that. So we had 1 soil sample as well that was below the direct contact zone of 4 feet. That was really where the culvert was. I think that sample was taken from a bit below 4 feet. We had an exceedance there, but because it was below the direct contact level and we have at least 4 feet of soil over it, it didn't make a lot of sense to chase that at this point. So everything's been covered with clean fill. So once we get that last soil removed at S33, another sample taken, then we should be able to finalize the report, request closure from the DNR.
Tom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I've just got a few questions and comments, and may I pass out also some information for the committee and Mr. Lindman as references?
No problem with that.
Thank you.
Here, I can pass them.
Thank you.
So, and I think you covered with some of the locations, Mr. Lindman, where you saw some existing exceedances, and you mentioned along the property boundaries. Is that correct?
Yep.
And as I'm looking at the map, and we've got it in front of us on the TV too, one of those sampling points was S36 toward the bottom there.
Yep.
And I think the TEQ, dioxin TEQ value on that was 50, listed in the results. What is that, when you say property boundary, what is the property it's adjacent to?
It's a private property. I think 122, I think, is the address on that one.
Sure, and so I'm familiar with that area. So those are residential backyards
Yep.
there on River Street, and if you see from S36 to S29, where there were also, I think, exceedances, those are all residential backyards there. And I know, one of the residents who lives there, who has a backyard there, has been concerned because I think as the map shows, the dotted black or slashed line appears to be excavation, and I think the blue line there is property boundary, and they're essentially right on top of one another. And I understand that's where the city's property line ends. So I'll just, as the older person for this area, just express a few concerns and sentiments after looking at this. My understanding with Wisconsin Administrative Code is that the full lateral or horizontal extent of the soil contamination is typically required to be defined. We see from these confirmation results that it has not been, since there are still significant exceedances at the edge of the excavation. So I think that's a concern for me. But I think sometimes when we talk about the numbers and so forth, it's difficult for maybe some who are not familiar with how they relate to state standards to really kind of wrap their heads around these numbers. So what I passed out for the committee, the first page is from the copper site in Superior, Wisconsin, and they had a similar issue with a similar set of contaminants there, dioxins and furans, off-site of the copper site, which was using penta there. And so DNR, and this was just in recent years, I had only become familiar, I think, with these documents in the last year or so, but DNR and DHS had actually collaborated on what they felt were protective cleanup levels for the environment and human health in Superior, Wisconsin. So on the first page are the cleanup levels that they had collaborated on to be protective of human health and the environment. And for the first one, the just non-industrial direct contact RCLs, like people's yards, they use the state's default assumptions, and the cleanup level that was listed as protective was 5. And then DHS worked on a site-specific recreational exposure cleanup level that was protective of health. And recreational, I imagine, kind of similar to a park setting, and it came up with 13. Now, Beezer, the polluter there who had taken over some of Copper's properties and operations over the years, I think, there'd been some EPA involvement on this, and like all polluters do, they tried to get looser cleanup standards. I'm not sure what ultimately happened there, but this is what DHL felt was safe, and it was 13 in a recreational scenario. And then I think the last one is probably state default levels, which puts it at 22. Just for the committee's awareness and the public's, the level you found essentially on the backyard of that resident S36 was 50. So that's about 10 times over the state's standard for dioxin TEQ, almost double the industrial setting one, and far over even the recreational level that DHS had felt was appropriate in Superior, Wisconsin. So, I'm guessing regulators will also note these issues with the numbers in terms of realizing, hey, we just worked on another neighborhood in Superior, Wisconsin, and this is way over what we thought was protective for human health and the environment. So I'm sure they'll find these concerns reasonable, but as the older person, until the full extent of the contamination laterally and horizontally is defined, and I'm realizing it's a complex situation, this may not be all the city's responsibility. I will not be supportive of site closure on this, but I wanted to point out also, and I'm kind of, I guess, maybe surprised REI had not maybe mentioned this when it had assessed some of these levels in the park. So initially there'd been assertions because of Waleco's samples that triggered the responsible party letter to the city. They had done some samples from aerial deposition, and they had tested right under or around some railroad ties and had come up with kind of some high TEQ levels. One of them was 62. And I think that, the assertion had been, well, there's some contamination from the railroad ties, but I just wanted you to know, and I guess REI as the city's consultant, that when you look at the profile of those samples that Waleco took, and one of them is sample N43, and you compare what they would often with Penta to kind of compare profiles, when you look at the HX-CDF congener, it does not match the hot spots in the park and near some of these yards. So for some of those railroad profiles, it appears to be a different contribution or set of contributions. I'd kind of like to know more about that. On the last page of the information that I handed out to the committee, and I won't go too deep into the minutia. Thank you for your patience, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out that what they found in that railroad sample, the N43, generally you would expect to see what they found with kind of Penta associated with railroad ties, and that would be that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 HX-CDF is the dominant congener. We do not see that in some of the hot spots near the culvert or people's yards. And where I did find that same anomaly, which I thought was very interesting, was in Gainesville, Florida, at the Coppers Superfund site there with the dioxins associated with its penta contamination. It showed the same dominance of the 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 HX-CDF congener. So that would really go against the grain of the literature on something like this, but we see the anomaly at the Coppers site in Gainesville with its penta, and we also see that in Riverside Park. So I just wanted to bring those things to your attention. And finally, and the city has committed to environmental justice. We had an environmental justice resolution that was passed. I believe the Sustainability Committee is talking about it later this week. On the second page of the information, and some of the site names got cut off there, but I'll give this to Alder Lukens so she, as a member of that committee, can take a look at this. But what we can see is, so there were more protective cleanup levels used in Superior, Wisconsin, when it came to dioxin contamination in a recreational setting and sometimes in that residential setting. Now, when you compare the kind of socioeconomic indicators of the southwest side of Wausau with Superior, Wisconsin, what you see is in the less protective situation, which would be the southwest side of Wausau, Wisconsin, the percentage of people of color is 47%, and the percentage of low income is 46%. However, when you look at the much more protective levels that they used in Superior, Wisconsin, the percentage of people of color was 0%, and the percentage of low-income residents was 17%. And in conclusion, I know this was inadvertent. I really respect what DHS and the DNR have done, and I respected the city cleaning up these levels. But the reality is we have some major disparities in the level of protectiveness in how things have been dealt with in the southwest side of Wausau versus a much more affluent area. So I just wanted to bring these things to your attention. I think we can probably work with regulators in a constructive way to make them right, but as they currently stand, I would kind of consider that inappropriate and unacceptable. We can make sure that protective cleanup levels are used. So thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
I do want to correct one thing that you said, Mr. Killian, when you were talking about the levels. On the chart that's in your packet that was sent out to you, those two River Drive addresses did not, the level is the 5. The number there is the not to exceed is 4.93, which is what the results are showing, and they are just at 5.1 and 5.6, not 50. You mentioned 50. There's no 50 in here, so
I
these are the
can,
results that we were given, and this is what the city was going by as far as levels of exceedance.
I can clarify that for you. There is a 50. It's on the S36 sample. It's the dioxin TEQ value. And you mentioned some decimals relating to 4. That's the dioxin TEQ level for the state. In Superior, Wisconsin, they simply rounded it up to 5. So I'll pull that up for you, Ms. Polly, one
You don't have to,
moment.
these are the results we're looking at, so that's what I'm just pointing out, is that this is what's been given to the committee and the city as far as the study that's been done, so these are the numbers. I just wanted to be clear to anybody that's watching, they can get a copy of these results if they want to, and Mr. Lemon, you can talk more to it if you want to, but that's where it shows that they are, and there's no numbers on here, so I can't say what sample it is, but
But there are numbers.
5.1 and 5.6 are right here, and the other ones that didn't exceed are less than 5, so they're slightly over. They're not 5 times over.
That's incorrect, and if I may explain, and I'm happy to explain this further in the future, at sample S36 at the backyard, taken on July 19th, 2023, you can see that the dioxin TEQ value at the bottom of that column is 50, and if you go to the left, you can see that REI put that the standard in Wisconsin for dioxin TEQ in a non-industrial setting is 4.82. That brings it to over 10 times that state non-industrial level. So I understand there are a lot of numbers here, Ms. Polly, but that assertion is correct, and that 50 borders a residential backyard.
Yeah, I think the one thing, we're looking at city-owned property at this point, right? And so that's what we're submitting to the DNR. So from our standpoint, when we take a look at S33 and that gets cleaned up, but the DNR is the one who's going to have to make a decision on whether further testing is going to be required, who's going to be responsible for that, and will there be responsible party letters to residents? So those are things that we'll have to work out, with the DNR, and the DNR will have to make decisions on those items as we move forward. But for purposes of closure of a site, we're looking at the city property, So any further investigation would have to be determined when, how, and who would be responsible for that, which would be at the state level. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lindman. And yes, residents certainly should not get a responsible party letter for dioxins and furans in that part of the city. The highest dioxin levels taken in state history were just to the west there. As a government, we should be assisting our community to make sure that they don't have levels 10 times over the state standard in their backyard. And that's something that's a role of government to
Right.
assist them. So they shouldn't be getting a responsible party letter. Thank you.
Well, I think, it is the state that does this, right? And so if the city council wants to get together and do something more, right, at the city level, then that's a decision for the body, right? But at this point, anything beyond what we were given, those determinations and how to move forward is going to be with the DNR. Yep. And I
Thank you.
understand your opinion.
Yes,
Yep.
and it's just a matter of advocacy, and maybe, yes, we could discuss that with the council to make sure that our citizens aren't victimized in a case like this and actually protect their interests. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Any future items on the agenda for the next month's meeting? All right. Number 7, our next meeting date is November 6, 2023 at 4:30, the council chambers. I will take a motion to adjourn this meeting. Motion by Sarah, second by Carol. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Everybody, have a great week.